There is a name for those that lose their parents. They're known as orphans. There is a name for those that lose their spouses. They're known as widows or widowers. There is no name for a parent who loses a child. That's because that is not the way the world is supposed to work. It's not the way humanity is supposed to work. But yet, my wife and I are two of millions of parents around the world that have lost their children. And it should be known that when you lose your child, the greatest part of you also dies with that child. And it is not without the work of some very talented psychotherapists and loving people that I've been able to find the strength to get out of bed in the morning, to find a way to find beauty in the world, to find a way to find love. As I've said, our hearts are ripped open as a parent that loses a child. All of the life within that heart flows out. Yet it keeps beating. You still have to get up. You still have to go through the world, even if you don't want to. So I would like to introduce a few people that have been quite meaningful in my life. Lynn Marie was the most powerful voice in my daughter's life in the 8 years that she struggled with addiction. The most powerful voice other than my wife and I to my daughter Kenza'S. And the most powerful voice in our family. My name is Robert Schnurr. My wife is Smaya Schnurr. We've started the Love Kenza'S Foundation. We're very proud that Lynn Marie has agreed to be a board member. When I lost my daughter, in a period of sobriety, to a request after a very difficult day for a Xanax that she asked on social media several friends for, she was given a Xanax. It was not from a prescription bottle. It was from a dealer, from a street, from a club. It was laced with fentanyl, and it immediately took her life. The amount of fentanyl it takes to kill a human being fits on the tip of a pencil. We are in a battle with opioid addiction that we are not winning. We're in a battle with an enemy with our hands tied behind our back. The formation of the Love Kenza'S Foundation is meant to be collaborative. As Martin Luther King said, we cannot walk alone. This foundation cannot walk alone. When my daughter passed, I said to Lynn Marie, I'm not going to make it. I need help. Lynn Marie said to me, there's only one person I know who is the greatest psychotherapist I know, and that is Lee, who is sitting here with us. And I called Lee. Lee helped me realize I needed to bring love back into my life. Most parents will have a difficult time with that. The hardest moment of the day for me is waking up in the morning and realizing that my eyes are open and I've got to face another day. And how do I get my feet from that mattress floor? And how do I walk through life? The one thing that's come out of COVID that I've learned is I could speak to somebody in India on Zoom. You don't need to fly them in anymore. So our goal is to bring the greatest minds, the greatest people, the greatest foundations together to hold hands. Again, as Martin Luther King said, we cannot walk alone. This foundation cannot walk alone. To get in front of governments, to get in front of the world, to get in front of parents, to help them, to help parents, to help children. There are voices of young adults that I will be adding to this website that bring tears to my eyes with their stories of addiction and recovery. I think young people would resonate more with young voices. I think parents would resonate more with other voices. We want to bring them all together. I think you could even expand on our goal as you help me write the mission statement. Lee, you yourself came up with the term Voices Conversations for the videos that we hope to add to what I repeatedly say is a living website. We hope to add as many voices as possible so that we can become the go-to website in a period of time for everyone in the world seeking help for addiction, for other foundations, for parents, for students, for young people, for anyone that is seeking help. We want to be a source.
I think to add to that, it's when we go back to accessibility, I hear all the time, even when, when Lee and I, when we run a group where we're mentioning, someone who is in recovery, who has, is a celebrity in recovery or has done something of note, most of the time we hear, oh, I didn't know that person was in recovery. Oh, I didn't know that information was out there. And there's so many people that are inspiring and doing the work, whether they're famous or not, and people just don't know. It's scattered into, hundreds of different podcasts and different websites and different blogs, and unless you're going to sit there and sift through it, you're not going to have access to information. And sometimes I sit in session and just psychoeducate and just give information, and that is not acceptable to me. People should have access to that.
Sometimes I think a great starting point when people have conversations, whether it's an opiate addiction or it's a parent isn't sure, is I always talk about what is addiction. And one way I explain to people, just my definition that tends to help the addict, but it makes the other person who feel like I'm not them. Because we have to understand we're all in this together. And one of the definitions I'll give it with addiction is any behavior, which includes substance abuse, that interferes with who you want to be and a quality of life that brings fulfillment or destroys that, is addiction. And I think that's important because and I think it's much better today, it was definitely the beginning of the opiate crisis, is, well, that's not about me. That doesn't concern me. And the problem is that reinforces the social attitude that they're a problem and I'm over here. I don't have a problem like that. And that causes the stigma that reinforces the trauma that gets them caught in the trauma. And everyone needs to, not tell almost every client, let's look and see what the addiction is that's in play for you.
There are several voices that are going to participate in what we call Voices Conversations on our website that are those that have struggled with addiction and have succeeded in their recovery. And I hear most often from them the shame that goes with addiction, the stigma that goes with addiction. I am baffled, as many of us are, that we recognize addiction as a disease, but there is no stigma with cancer, diabetes, tuberculosis. There is stigma with substance abuse, addiction. Managed healthcare today talks about mental health because it's in vogue, but addiction still is shadowed by a stigma, shadowed by shame, and many people are scared to talk about it. We're here to help with that.
I believe is helping people hold their suffering with as much compassion as possible. Because I think I said to you earlier, I'm really recognizing more and more that all healing ultimately is self-healing. And I want someone to recognize as I talk to them that they'll say things like, oh, that's really interesting. And I said, what is that interesting? That interesting is that thing coming inside of you that is doing something for you. I hear more and more from clients that it's not just about the healing. They want to learn a way to actually live and contribute to the world. And so I'm really passionate about that as well. It's like there's the healing part, and then who are you? What do you want to? How do you want to live? How do you want to create? Because the people who deal with recovery, I got emotional with this one.
Like a tissue.
They don't recognize until they do, and the world who unwittingly has learned to shame them doesn't realize how strong of a person it is to actually recover.
Yes.
And once they see that, I'm like, now let's see what you can do for the world. Because get over it. Addiction is one of the hardest things a human being can go through. And once they see that strength, it's like, now what are you capable of?